Welcome back. It's your boy Seth Garu Baxter with Maker's Bar, where we are creating 1 million leaders today for tomorrow. Today I have a special guest. As some of my audience is aware, you know that there's a program very near and dear to my heart called Youth in Government through the YMCA and the school system. I'm privileged to have an upcoming author of a soon-to-be released book, as well as an organization. Stop screaming at your kids. Now, we as parents, if you are from a particular generation, we have kind of grown accustomed to the idea that mom yells or dad yells, and that's what we grew up with. But is there something to that? Is there something to the idea of stop screaming at your kids? Are there some things in there? Well, that will be one of the aspects we'll be covering today as far as her upcoming book is concerned. But we'll also be delving into young people in particular, where we as parents can be more of assistance, and touching on some personal stories that our guests today will also be able to share. I am pleased to say she's one of the most beautiful moms with my program with Youth in Government, and a dear friend, and I love her very dearly. And we are so pleased to have her here with us today, Stacey Silberman, author of the upcoming book, Stop Screaming at Your Kids. Stacey, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you today, my dear?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
It's absolutely, truly an honor and a pleasure. I have been so honored that you were coming up, and for a number of reasons that I'm sure some will touch on today. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. I look forward to enlightening you.
Absolutely. Now, in addition to her upcoming book, she's doing a number of great ideas. Establishing a number of great ideas as far as helping parents to be able to understand some of the technicalities of being a parent, and where there are some ideas she might be able to offer suggestions in her own experience. So, Stacey, tell us where you hail from and what's your origin story that led you up to this point.
Well, I was actually born and raised in the San Fernando Valley in Encino, and I've lived here my whole life. And I raised my kids here in this area in the San Fernando Valley. And, I think there's a great community here. And I just really appreciate all that I've learned by having connections with people over the years who've taught me so much, including the do's and the don'ts of parenting.
The do's and the don'ts of parenting. Now, both of us being parents, and a number of parents who are in our audience, some of those do's and don'ts, just some quick bullet points. What would you say, some do's and some don'ts in your experience? What would some of the do's be?
Well, the reason that I came up with Stop Screaming at Your Kids is I was having a conversation with somebody about the idea that I had for a book. And I was talking about how my father used to scream at us all the time, and he scared the heck out of us kids. Like, we just were like constantly walking on eggshells, and we never felt safe in our own home. And I was talking to somebody like, oh my gosh, it should be called Stop Screaming at Your Kids. And that's how it came out. It was just through a conversation about how I landed on the subject matter, which actually originated from, number one, I've been a mother for over 30 years. Number one, so I've had a lot of experience as a parent myself to 2 children. And number three, I worked in a recovery center as a chef and mother figure and mentor. And I always referred to all of the clients as the kids, no matter how old they were. I felt like they were all like kind of like kids all over again. And I just came to the conclusion that all of the kids who were in recovery really needed some reparenting, because a lot of the origin stories that they tell about why they think they are in the place that they are in at that time lead back to family problems and not feeling like they were seen or heard or in a safe place in their own home. And often parents, the parents that raised me, didn't allow us, they didn't validate our emotions. You know, if I cried, my dad would tell me, you go to your room and you cry in your room, like go be alone while you're really sad and traumatized. And so like I wasn't consoled. I wasn't parented when I needed it the most. The most of the time when I got parenting and the most attention I got from my father was when he was screaming at me. So what we're trying to promote right now is the idea that parenting should not be about control and scare tactics. Parenting should be about connection with your children. And that means deep connection, like, you know, like really looking at your kids, being present with them, letting them know that their emotions matter and that it's okay to feel big emotions like anger, sadness, frustration, happiness, upset, whatever it is. Any emotion that was outside of what our parents thought was good behavior was absolutely not allowed. And so parents raise their kids to become people pleasers and also to be compliant, but screaming doesn't actually teach them anything. It only teaches them fear. And what real discipline is supposed to teach is how to learn something. But I think the parents, including myself when I was raising my kids, confused discipline with dropping the hammer on the kids, you know, like say, you better listen to me or else. And like literally we did get frustrated in that sense. And also my first son, Max, my first child, was very high maintenance. He was absolutely beautiful and adorable. And he thought everything was hilarious. And, you know, he was constantly running from me. So I was constantly chasing him. And when I couldn't catch him, I would yell. And it worked sometimes, but it became a really bad habit that I really regret.
And one of the things I'll share with our audience, Maxie, as I call him, he was one of the kids in my program, Youth and Government, through the YMCA. And Maxie was his nickname. And he was one of the most incredible human beings I had the privilege of knowing. And having Stacey share him with Youth and Government and the thousands of other kids whose lives he touched by his presence as well. That's why this particular interview is really important for parents as well as for me in us honoring Maxie and his memory and things that we hope to share with and impart to some of the parents. And that's Stacey, Stop Screaming at Your Kids is one of the reasons why this book is particularly important. So some of the insights that you gathered in understanding how Maxie was a energetic person and he was running away. What were some of the insights that led you to this place?
Well, let me first, I didn't give the whole origin story of how I got here now, because yes, the audience should know that I lost Max to a drug overdose back in June of 2017. And he was 25 years old. And we had been battling his substance use disorders for about 10 years. And Max was diagnosed with anxiety disorder, ADHD, panic disorder, depression, and, you know, the kind of everything that he had kind of mimicked bipolar, but ADHD and the other issues that he had could mimic that. So it was often hard to treat him. And so therefore he treated himself by self-medicating. And his drug of choice was mostly Xanax, which was for his anxiety. But Xanax is a very dangerous drug, very addictive, and you build a tolerance to it very quickly. So that was the drug of choice for him. And often if he couldn't find that, he would use other things, you know, other prescription medications, etc. So when he passed away, that was the beginning of the fentanyl crisis. although the authorities were not aware of it at that time. And although the coroner didn't detect it in his blood because they didn't know yet to test for it, I believe that that is actually what killed him, because he would buy pressed pills from dealers. I don't think anybody knew at that point it was out there, but there were a lot of deaths. So anyway, so that's what kind of began my journey. After he passed away, of course, my husband, my daughter, and I, we were so devastated and heartbroken, and like we were just grief stricken. So for like a couple of years, there wasn't really a lot of work that we did, but I was always looking for ways to mend my broken heart. And in doing all of the things that I did to heal myself, I learned that I never really got over my childhood traumas, and that I had a lot of inner work to do. And that meant inner child work. And there's something called parts work. And parts work is where you work on like different parts of yourself that are like, could be from when you were, 2, or when you were 5, or when you were 6 or 10, and different things that might have happened to you that kind of stuck with you. And oftentimes these things stick with you within your body, and that's called somatic work. When I was going through therapy, even before I had kids, or when I got married, or when I was in family therapy, they never talked about somatics, because I just want to say this because it's really important for people to know.
For sure.
If you're going to talk therapy, that is only that's just a part of the equation. Talking about things, getting to the root of it is super important. And then, getting back to what might be there without re-traumatizing yourself, also super important. But what's really important after you identify what those problems are is to release those things from your body somatically. So I didn't discover all that until like much later in my journey to inner healing, so that I could be a better parent, even to my daughter, who was she was like in college at the time when Max passed away. So she was a young adult, but I also had some repair work to do with her. And what that meant was repairing myself. So going through that inner child work and the parts work, I started to realize that I was really, really, really damaged by the screaming, and that I never got over it. But the saddest part was that I did it too, because that's all I knew. And it was like embedded in me. And it took a lot of work to identify that and to go after that conditioning, and that I was conditioned to believe that that was proper parenting when it was not. And the only thing I could say to myself is, honestly, I did not know. I didn't have that wisdom. The therapist didn't know. Nobody knew. They didn't talk about those things back then. There was no handbook. There were no guides. There was no advice. Nobody told parents not to scream at their kids. I don't ever recall it. Even though in a way I probably knew that it scared my kids. And so when you're screaming at your kids, what are you doing? You're creating a stress response for your kids. So they're constantly in fight or flight mode, which means that their nervous systems are frazzled. And when their nervous systems are frazzled, that means that they're not going to be able to behave at school maybe as well as they could, or with friends. And they might do things that might make them seem like they're not behaving. But what I've learned is that when kids misbehave, it's not because they want to be bad. They literally don't know how to express themselves. They are immature. They're children. And we as adults, we expect way too much of them. at times when they literally don't know what's going on. And if you compare that to us screaming, we're the adults. We're the ones who should be emotionally regulated so that we can teach children how to be calm and maybe process their emotions or process things that are going on in a way that is going to help them communicate better. And so when kids are having tantrums and things like that, it ultimately comes down to they don't know how to communicate better because they're just children. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I think if we can elaborate a little further in this portion of it, when we're talking about stop screaming at your kids, it's not just in the sense of they're in the street or they're by the stove and the fire's burning. And so if they're in the street, we as parents scream, "Don't go in the street," or "Don't touch the fire." So we're not talking about those moments where a parent is caught up in adrenaline and they're trying to hurry to protect their child. We're talking about irregular disciplinary actions and or in conversations where we're upset with the choice they made. Is that what you want us to understand? And if you can elaborate on that a little further?
That's exactly true. There's times where, especially with my Max, I would be at the park with the play group and all the babies and he walked early too. All the babies would be sitting there playing. He'd be running off trying to go in the street. And if he was faster than me in that moment, I had to scream to stop him. But like the screaming I'm talking about is just basically, you're frustrated, you're angry. And instead of actually physically, and I don't mean physically in an abusive way, but physically walking over to your child, maybe putting your hands on them, giving them a hug and saying, "I can see that you're going through something very difficult right now. I just want you to know that you're safe. I'm here for you. I love you. I want to listen to you. And if there's something that you need to tell me right now, I want to help you. I'm your partner. I'm your leader." Most importantly, parents don't realize what a leadership position they're in. I don't think we equate it that way. We are the leaders of our family. We are the leaders of our family. And when we build families, what are we creating to go out into the world? We're creating other types of leadership. That leadership from that child might go into peer support. That leadership might go into government, like student government. That leadership might go into leading kids to just treat each other better, being the voice for being good, being better. And so, you wonder, like, how do kids become bullies and this kind of thing? Well, where do you think they learn it from? Parents who parent this way, and I'm sorry, I can't exclude myself, are being bullies. I didn't mean to be. Now, my kids were never bullies. I taught my kids to be kind, to love everyone, and to be very warm. So I didn't have the bullying problem, but I did act like a bully at times. And that is what the old paradigm of parenting kind of looks like, because big giant parents with all the power and all the intellect and all the emotional intelligence they're supposed to have the ability to set a better example. And when we don't, because we are emotionally dysregulated and we are frustrated and letting the frustration own us, we lose control. And in losing control, we behave in ways that we regret. And if I had to put it that way, I'd say that's what summed me up. And the fact that I had ADHD, it was not diagnosed. And that is the crux of ADHD, is not having control of your executive function and your emotional regulation. So like here we are as a parent, we're supposed to be setting the example and teaching our kids how to be calm. That's leadership. And so when those kids get that kind of emotional regulation, then when they get to be a little bit older, as the problems get a little bit bigger, maybe more complex, and it involves their peers and their friends and the teachers and maybe a principal or whoever might be out in the world, if somebody's mean to them, when we teach them how to regulate their emotions and how to take a pause and to kind of think before they act, they have more success in their daily life, and they learn to be more emotionally intelligent. And I'd say that the goal of parenting today should be to raise really emotionally intelligent children. Because if they don't have that, and they're AP students who are getting into the best universities, they're super successful, they work really hard, but what happens is they end up burning themselves out because they're people pleasers. And they're like just kind of running on a program that was instilled by their parents. But when kids are emotionally intelligent, they can make a distinction between what is healthy success and what is not healthy success. And another thing to say about this is that if you look at kids like in the Ivy League colleges and really, the harder to get into universities, the stress levels of those young adults is off the charts. And so like if I had it to do all over again, when Max with his ADHD and his anxiety and his panic attacks and all the issues that he had that I didn't know how to deal with, even though he started therapy when he was 4 years old. And I had him in therapy and I had him tested every which way. He was kind of an enigma. They didn't really totally diagnose him until he was like 15. And he also had like it was called dysgraphia. Like it kind of goes with ADHD. These are comorbid things. But if I would have understood
Stacey, real quick.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, describe dysgraphia for some people who might not be aware.
Okay. Dysgraphia is this kind of lesser known learning disorder. It's where you have a hard time taking a pen to paper and writing, like, let's say you're listening to notes and you have to take notes. It would be like harder for him to concentrate on listening and writing at the same time. However, if they allowed him to use what was called an Alpha Smart at the time, which was like a keyboard, the old fashioned keyboard before computers and the other technology came in.
Yes.
It somehow made it easier for him to learn and to take notes and to learn at a level that was closer to his peers. And then another thing is that since we didn't really know he had ADHD, and also they didn't know many of the traits of ADHD, another trait of ADHD is that most kids with that condition, and that's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And in that condition, there's several types. There's not just one. So people could have different levels and different types. Not to get into all of that right now, but Max had what was called a decline type, which means he had hyperactivity, he had learning disabilities, he had emotional dysregulation, he had executive dysfunction. And so he wasn't able to navigate school daily, and he was always in trouble. And so with always being in trouble, I was always getting the phone calls from the teachers and the principals, which really freaked me out and frustrated me because I didn't know what to do. In retrospect, if I had it to do all over again, I would say none of that matters. I would either pull him out of school and do something else, or I would just tell the teachers in the school, I'm sorry, it's a problem for you, but my son's mental health is way more important than his homework and his, doing the home. I understand if it was like disruption, which it was, then I'd have to do something. But that's like basically was like my daily life with Max was constantly dealing with school issues. Now I know, Seth, because you had interaction with Max in the school. So I know
Yes.
firsthand.
Yes, I do. I do. And I share with you and the audience, Maxie had a brilliance to him, but he was, as you and I have discussed this term, unfiltered in some of his choices. And he did share with me, and in working with young people for a good number of years, he shared with me about some of his challenges that he faced. And a number of the way he would show his genius were also always related to young people who had ADHD or ADD. Some of their genius is shown in there. And we spoke about this desire, this passion for justice. And Maxie was definitely about justice on things. And you see this passion, along with some of the troublemaking of because Maxie was an extremely good looking kid. And, the girls always would say, "Oh, Maxie. And they had this thing. And he was one that really tried to keep himself humble, but because of his adventurous nature, as I called it at that time, the trouble would, the trouble would ensue.
Let's call it good trouble.
Good trouble.
Now we know it wasn't all good trouble. No. But the school, but like I think that like Max, he had a hard time sometimes connecting with his peers. Even though he might have had friends and stuff, he did struggle with that. And so oftentimes kids with ADHD are the class clowns, because that's how they do end up connecting with the other kids, is by being funny or by maybe doing something they shouldn't.
Outlandish and grandiose.
Yeah. It's all a part. It's really common.
There's no underestimating.
But he was so smart. Even when I had him tested, yes. I mean, his IQ was really high. But there was always they couldn't figure out the discrepancy between the I forget what there's two, when you do these intelligence tests or these tests to see if there's issues, there's the verbal, and then there's the doing, I forget what it's called, where you're doing things. And he always had this discrepancy. They're like, we can't figure it out. I mean, he had ADHD. It was literally they're like, is he not doing his work because he can't? Or is he not doing his work because he knows that it's difficult and he's not trying? So there were always all of these discussions about, his ability, or whether it was intention, or so going back to the parenting thing, when we connect with our kids, I think it's easier to really get a better picture of where their behavior is coming from. And that if we really, really ask them, and we get so curious about what is driving them, and we do an emotional inquiry, we're going to feel like we owe them our patience and our tolerance.
That's a very good way to put it. I think that's an excellent way to put it. Yes.
And it's hard. I mean, the one thing I'll say is parenting is so hard.
Yes.
Nothing is harder than that.
Job. I agree, especially to raise them the way that we would like to make these human beings be the greatest that they are and have the best lives possible. And sharing another story about Maxie, I remember so in youth and government, we had all the kids were put in particular areas of the government that was a part of the program. And so before we going up for one of the conferences, I used to have all the kids, we'd be up at night and do games to practice for what they're going to do for legislation and or other things. And Maxie was partnered up with someone, and he had to get ready for this. And I hadn't fully gathered the scope of where things were with him in this area yet. And so I was wondering, it was like, Maxie, boy, why are you not getting it together? And he said, I'm going to get together. I'm going to get together. And I didn't really grasp what he was trying to express at the time, because I knew he was having somewhat of a challenge, but I wasn't sure where I could help at. And so finally, I would ask the kids before we got on the bus, so did you guys study your role? Did you understand what you're getting ready to propose and so forth? And I was kind of concerned because Maxie said, no, I don't feel like I really prepared that way or on that, but he had this thing in his head where he didn't feel he had done enough. But I tell you, so I went around to all the kids to film them to make sure so I can have stuff for the parents and see how they were doing. And Maxie had this great deal of anxiousness, anxiety on how well he was going to do or how poorly he was going to do. And he thought he was just going to bomb it. So I came in there with the 3 other advisors, and we came in to see, because he was in part of the court program. He killed it. And I thought, how could he have done this well? And he was saying that he was having a tough time to get it together and so forth. But partially it was because he processed the information in a whole different way than the other kids were doing. And he went up there, and I never forget. So after he won his particular case, and I said, son, how'd you do that? And he said, I don't know. I just got it later. But he had a methodology, and he just killed it. And there is a genius in that too, because the learning styles with young people with ADHD and some of the other challenges that young people have faced during that, Maxie had his own way, and that's how he just dazzled them, because I had no clue. I was thinking, oh, okay, so I'm going to have to make sure we get the advisors to assist him more. He absolutely slayed it, and it was due to the way he knew how to learn for himself, what was his best methodology of learning. And that's some of the lessons that we as parents learn. They will adapt when we are not sure what is the off-center place for our young people who have these challenges. They sometimes are the best teachers. And Maxie taught me, he learned the way he understood where he can get it outside of himself. And he absolutely killed it. And he won his case.
He was a very skilled talker, that kid.
Absolutely.
His verbal skills were like through the roof. I mean,
incredibly. I saw his speech. I recorded his speech. It was mind blowing. It just, he absolutely killed it. So that brings me to this part. In discussing with parents about stop screaming at your kids, when we're talking about that, would you say some of the disadvantages of screaming at your kids is a hindrance and or somewhat slows down where their progress is intellectually, because they're in this fear state, or maybe not even fear state, but retribution state of, I don't want to get yelled at, so let me tiptoe here. How would you examine that? Explain, what would you say, how that participates in their learning capabilities, where parents are screaming, or that's kind of the norm in the household?
Well, I mean, who knows if that is the beginning of perfectionism, if that has something to do with it. I mean, I was a perfectionist, and I believe that I probably imparted that bad behavior on my children. I was a helicopter mom. Like, I would help them, like I would rescue them and, do stuff, so on one side I was screaming, and on the other side I was like, what can I do to help you? I was there as a mom. I mean, I really did. I was an at-home mom, and I did, support my kids, in their work and things like that. But I had a perfectionistic way about me, and Max was quite a perfectionist. And going back to like thinking he couldn't do that case that you said he won, that goes to that imposter syndrome that a million people have. And,
Yes.
Of thinking we can't do it, or we don't have it, or we don't know what we're talking about. We're fakes. But in fact, like, we actually know it really well. Like, we really do have our act together. We really do have that wisdom. We just don't believe in ourselves all the time. And part of that is because, in particular, kids with ADHD receive about 200% more criticism in their school careers than the average neuronormal child. And so we're kind of conditioned to believe that we're always in trouble, that we're always going to get in trouble, that we're always kind of going to fail somehow. And I had that, and I do believe that Max might have had that. It's a kind of a mindset issue, but also brought on by real things that happen, like in school, with a lot of the
Absolutely.
trouble. And also by the parents, like I could have been, again, more tolerant, more patient, more supportive, and just telling my kids, no matter what, are incredible. You're so smart. You always do such things so much so well. We all make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. Perfectionism is not what it's about. It's just about progress and just making an effort and stepping up. But I didn't always have that mindset myself about my own self. So I didn't have the tools to teach that at that time. So, I mean, that's really what I'd love to coach parents to learn how to do, is to like really change how you communicate with your kids, what you're feeling and how you feel about them. Because like, even if a kid did something wrong, and I was able to say this a lot of the time, that, if you do something wrong, I'm mad at the thing. I'm not mad at you. I may
Yes.
not like the thing that you did, but I love you.
Yes.
And you are not that thing. That's just one little thing out of a whole life. You can't let these little things define you. But if it's like constant and all the time, as it was with Max, it does add up. And then it makes it harder to have him believe that that's true. And then they just don't like themselves, and they have a negative opinion of themselves. And I think that's where depression creeps in, and low self-worth, and possibly some suicidality, which he did experience when he was a teenager. And I thank God he came to me and he told me. And I spent a lot of time talking him through it. As a matter of fact, that's how he got his first tattoo. He was 15. I had no idea he was into tattoos. I don't know if he even knew. And I was trying to find a way to like lift him up out of his stupor, out of his suicidal ideation. And I literally spent like 5 hours with him in his room, talking to him, just connecting with him. And at the end of the conversation, somehow I started bargaining with him. I mean, after all that talk, you're just going to do anything to try to save your child, from that kind of thinking. And so I don't know how I even got to it, because I'm not I have tattoos now because of him, but somehow it came up that he wanted a tattoo. And I said, well, would that help you right now? Like, would that change how you feel about yourself right now? And he's like, yes, it would change everything for me. And so I made a deal with him that he could get a tattoo. He got to choose where it went, but I got to decide what it said. And it said tolerance.
Oh, interesting. Bargaining chip. That's a great maneuver.
So he wanted it to be, it was like right here on his chest. It said tolerance is key, because at that point he was intolerant of others, and others were intolerant of him. That was like the crux of our conversation about how, like, it's always with kids about being liked or not liked, or, getting along with society, with your peers. And, Max always did really well with older people and little kids. He had a really hard time in his peer group. He never felt accepted. And that's another ADHD thing. I felt that too, as a child growing up. And that feels really hard, to accept sometimes. You never feel like, where do I belong? Where do I fit in? And so whatever it was, that tattoo gave him that sense of belonging to something. And then after he got the first tattoo, he did go a little crazy. And then there's a lot that happened from that. But anyway, I consider tolerance to be like a superpower, actually.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. Great way to put it.
Tolerance is key. I believed it then.
It's a great way to put it. Now, in your upcoming book, what are some of the insights, or maybe I'll reframe that. In the book, will there be teaching methods that you're hoping to inspire to give to parents as tools and mechanisms they can use as ways to not scream and or to pre-activate that calm spirit inside parents? Are you going to have somewhat of a workbook? Describe to us some of the context of the book, because my understanding also will be some of these stories with Max will be a part of that as well in the lessons that you learned. So in your upcoming book, what would you say it will be? Somewhat like a manual and or a biography? How would you describe the way it's going to be contextual?
I would describe the book more as a manual, because it would have been great if I could just like talked all about Max in the book and it made it about him, which is originally my original idea. But then as I really got to understanding publishing and books and what people are really looking for, it's one thing to talk about we and us, but what I really needed to talk about was you and them. You being the parents out there that really are drowning and need help. So it went from being like a story about Max's story to Max being kind of like an avatar for a typical child who really needed parents to understand him better and to connect with him on a really deep level, to understand why he was the way that he was. And so the book is presented in, I didn't want it to be heavy on the text, like all this reading. So when I wrote it, I came up with the concept that I wanted it to be more of a short, punchy book, something that got
punchy. When you say punchy, let's go back to punchy. Punchy meaning bullet pointish, or what? When you say punchy?
More like bullet pointish that made points about each subject. And like I have the book right here, and there are all kinds of. I guess I could show it, but it reads more like a manual in the sense of there's a little story that says, these things happen, like maybe there might have been, just giving examples, there might have been spilled juice, or you're getting ready in the morning and the child constantly doesn't do what they're supposed to do and you're constantly frustrated, kind of giving an example of that. And then it gives an example of how to do it the right way and the wrong way, emphasizing doing it the right way without using a lot of too many words and keeping it really simple. And then using the wisdom of other experts in the parenting field who are well known to back up those ideas. So we have a lot of quotes by Dr. Becky Kennedy, who is a parenting expert who did a TED Talk, and it's called Good Inside. She wrote a book called Good Inside. So like, I really liked her ideas. So there's a few ideas from her, and there's a few ideas from, Dr. Gabor Mate, who talks about attachment theory. And then there's The Power of the Pause by Viktor Frankl, like that quote. And that's a really well-known one. I mean, everybody talks about the power of the pause now, because I think that when we fly off the handle, there's no pausing, and that's actually a pretty big deal, even though it's so simple. And then there's all kinds of other experts that we quote as we get into each chapter and each type of behavior that could be improved upon. But some subjects are, for example, we'll say, like screaming doesn't teach, it disconnects. And another, like, these are some points that I wrote down. Your child isn't giving you a hard time. They're having a hard time.
Mhm.
Discipline isn't about punishment. It's about teaching. And if yelling worked, we'd only have to do it once. So
What a
children
great
don't learn.
way.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go on.
I was just saying, what a great way to say that.
And another thing is, like, children don't learn by fear, they learn by connection. So if you connect with kids, they're going to really tune into you. They're going to lean in. They're going to be like, wow, yeah, I get that. And it might take a whole bunch of times because they're developing brains. They're very neuroplastic, and they've got so many things going on a regular basis, with school and friends and parents and their dog, and it could be so many things. There's a lot going on. So one point might not make it into their brain right away. And that's where it takes consistency from us as parents to not just tell them the things, but to model those things. And there's nothing more than modeling that's going to teach them. Because how they say, like, how kids go to school and they say the craziest things that parents never want them to say?
Yes.
You're like, okay, like, clearly, where did they learn? Like, clearly they learned this from their parents. But the parents didn't tell them to do that. They witnessed it. And so, so that's part of it. Another point is, the calmer you are, the safer your child feels. So
I love that. I
you said
love
your
that.
father was very calm.
He was. He was the epitome of calmness, and things could be going. I remember particular times when my mom was sick with breast cancer, or my brother, who was developmentally challenged, was going through a crisis, or we had a huge hurricane. No matter what the circumstance was, he always came at it with a calm presentation, and he was able to handle it skillfully. And that stuck with me a while. Now, my mom screaming stuck with me as a tough Puerto Rican lady from New York,
Well,
which
you
we
have
spoke
both
about.
sides. Tell me which one you think is better.
I that's an easy tell.
We can love. Look, I mean, well, I I don't know how. I mean, I can't say that I loved my dad, like, I loved him so much. I mean, I loved him. He was my father. But, like, you still loved your mom. You know that she was full of
Yes,
love.
very much.
And my mom was really critical. She didn't scream, but she was just very critical and not very supportive at times. I still love her very much. Like, she
Yes,
learned what she learned from, she had a trauma in her childhood. But I mean, thank God you learned from your dad, but you learned it
yes,
by observing, right?
yes, yes.
So, and then another point is, emotional regulation starts with us, not the child. Child is just a little sponge. Your child's behavior is a reflection of their needs, not a reflection of their defiance.
Oh wow, that's a
So
gem.
their needs may not be met. And we just want to know why they're having a tantrum. And that is where that curiosity comes in. And
Absolutely.
then connection, another thing we say is, connection is the antidote to power struggles. So when you connect and you get curious with your child and you ask them questions about, why are you feeling this way? Why do you think you're having a tantrum? If they're calm at that point, tantrums are a whole other thing, mostly with younger ones. But once a child is at a point where they can listen, and by the way, when they're having a tantrum, less is more, less words. See if they'll let you hug them, to, like, hold them. Otherwise, just let them come out of it. And if you're in a store and you need to take them out, you do. Um, um,
I'm curious, Stacey, if I may. This book, is it targeted at a specific age group for parents, or so if a parent who has a 3-year-old and a parent who has a 15-year-old, stop screaming at your kids, can both of those parents pick up this book and still get information or useful information from it at their different ages with their young people?
yes, absolutely. The only thing it may not apply to as much are infants, because
Okay.
although like I watch all these infants on TikTok and on Instagram that are being recorded doing amazing things, it's shocking how much babies seem to pick up at a very young age.
Absolutely.
I mean, shocking. So I think that by
Absolutely.
beginning with these tactics, even with a baby, and like talking to them, there's this one lady, the infant, it's like a 2-month-old infant, and she's just lying there having this one-way conversation with her baby. The baby is lying there literally listening to every word. Now, that baby may not understand the words themselves, but the baby understands the tone and then the connection. So this is really for every age. And then, at each age, you might get a little bit different with your emotional inquiry, because as they get older, you can ask them more. But even with a 3-year-old who will have a tantrum for sure and will seem like they're just being a brat, and parents will think, oh, that child is such a brat, what a bad seed. That makes me so upset. That child is obviously struggling with something. You just haven't figured out what it is yet, and maybe you
Yes.
haven't even asked. And you definitely don't send a 3-year-old to their room to be alone.
Yes.
But we all used to do timeouts. Like that's what Dr. Spock or whoever was the
That's
parenting,
right.
the
I remember it very well.
parenting expert at the time. It was all timeouts and this and that, and all that kind of thing. That doesn't teach a child how to process emotion or upset. That just tells them you're on your own at this age. Good luck, kid. That's what I got.
That's some of it. But I think we were so captivated by these new ways of thinking about how to parent. And you said it earlier, they're I think historically they might have had some insight, but there weren't really any parent manuals, how to raise your kid kind of thing. And we were so used to kind of flying by the seat of our pants. So I am very curious as to, with some of the information provided in the book. So, because parents have different ages of young people, some of the wisdom they get with their child that's now 15, but if they didn't have the book when this young person was 3, they still can have learned and used these mechanisms for the next 3 years, so to speak, before the young person goes off on their own and or turns of that age. And so I'm understanding from this book, it is a diverse age span for parents to be able to use as a manual that says no matter what age you are parenting, as a parent, if you stop screaming at your kids, here's some other ways that we can help them become these people that we're really trying to see. And these are some helpful hints and inside tricks of the trade. Correct?
That's correct. And you know what? It's even if they're teenagers, it's really not too late to bring this kind of parenting in. It's not over until it's over. And
Yes.
especially if the child wants to have a better relationship with their parent and their family and their siblings and their teachers or whatever, they're going to obviously welcome any kind of new idea that's simple.
Yes.
The whole point of this is that we kept it very, very simple and laid it out in little steps. And then at the end of each chapter, there's actually like a step by step as to how to go about it. But
At the
again,
end of each chapter?
pardon me?
You said at the end of each chapter there is?
At the end of each chapter, yeah, there's like a little, like kind of like a little, a bit of information as to take this, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and how to practice this on a weekly basis. So people could just do like a chapter here or a chapter there. They could jump around in the book any way they want. It's not linear. It's not like in an order or anything. It's just you could go to the table of contents and find, okay, this is my issue. Go to that chapter, read about it a little bit, and then get the practical tips for how to implement that idea in very simple terms and not a lot of information, which is my major requirement, because people don't have time to have to dig through fluff, to find the most important details. And
Absolutely.
That's what I wanted to lay out. And, there's another place for fluff, in other kinds of books, but not in a parenting manual. Let's get right to the point, and
yes.
Let's help you with whatever this problem is right now. So like within 5 minutes, you could find that page and read it and have some practical information to take to your child. And if you have to read it, you read it, because if your child knows that you are literally making an effort to figure out how to be a better parent and how to connect with them, they may be a little, childish because they're children, but they're going to appreciate that. And they're going to say,
I feel that's so true.
My mommy loves me. My mommy is trying to help me. And even at an older age, when I did that with Max when he was 15, I had no idea what I was doing. It ended with a tattoo, but like I would have done anything. If I had this book, I would have appreciated it. It would have helped me in that time with a 15-year-old.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. Inside, are there little stories on the inside to Max and Maxie, as I say, to his life and you and his relationship and parenting, where Maxie is included?
Some of it. I have a dedication, that
yes.
I wrote for him, that's a little bit more personal.
Okay.
It's in the more like in the introduction and the dedication that are more about Max. There's a chapter called Max's Legacy, Tolerance is Key. From Lost to Mission, the superpower of tolerance, listening as an act of love, even though it may be really hard. And, that's a chapter that's, relates to some of the things that I went through with him. And then in the beginning, like I said, and then another part is, it's called Creating a Harmonious Family Dynamic. Our family struggled. So that really relates to Max, but also legacy and growth. That what I really wanted about this book was to leave a legacy on Max's life and death, and to make sure that his spirit knows that he's never going to be forgotten, and that his spirit and his legacy are going to go on to help and save, I hope to say, millions of other children. I mean, I'd like to see those numbers, but, let's hope for the best.
Yes.
So he definitely is represented in here. But it was really important to apply this to the widest audience possible. So it's for parents to be and for parents current. And originally I was going to emphasize kids with neurodivergence more. There's a chapter on that. But I also felt like it would be a little bit too much on just neurodivergence, because everything that's written in this book about connecting with children applies to every child. Whether they're foster children, whether they're adopted, whether they're godchildren, whether they're grandchildren, whether they're friends' children, and you just need to talk to them. I mean, there are times where I spoke to friends' children, they needed my help. I've always been a good listener, and I've always been pulled into things like that. So anytime you need to connect with any child, even I think as a teacher, or as a mother figure in a recovery center where I was, this would have helped me, to connect with, they were adults, but they were kids to me because they acted like, to me, they were like full on children. So
the applications can go to a variety of how you are in a parenting phase. So if you're a substitute parent to some degree, or a surrogate parent, being that you're a godparent or you've adopted children, the valuable lessons in Stop Screaming at Your Kids is for any parental role where you want insight on how to communicate better overall. That's what we're supposed to take as some of the applications of the book itself, correct?
Correct. 100%.
I can't wait for it to be released, because I find myself in working with parents, and I've had some of the greatest parents in working with Maxie and some of the kids with youth and government. I think the work that you're doing with this book is instrumental, and it couldn't come at a better time, because currently the way the world is transitioning, we as parents, no matter what age our young people, our children might be, we always are looking for other ways to improve our parenting, and or at least wanting to be a better parent. So this book is at the right time. And I can't think of any way better to honor Maxie himself and you as his mom and as the parents, to be able to say, here's some of the things I've learned from this, and let's see where we can take some of these tools and share this so other parents, millions of other parents, because that's our goal, can receive some instruction from this and have learned from some of the lessons we've learned as parents.
Definitely. Definitely. And
now,
especially for grandparents who are the ones of the older generation.
Oh, yes.
Get on the ball
Right.
with some of this stuff, because you hear about parents and grandparents arguing over parenting styles of today versus yesterday.
Yes.
And, it's for them too.
So one of the things that we as parents, or even the newer, younger parents, can do is get this as a stocking stuffer for the grandparents.
Oh yeah, they'll love that. You know what? I'll tell you where this will come in more. I think with like what you're doing with podcasting and amplifying messages in the verbal form where people can listen, which I think is sometimes easier, more entertaining, to take in a lot of information, to at least plant a seed of an idea that might inspire them to pick up the book, or like for parents who are in the early stages of parenthood to go to, whether it be private coaching, which is something that I'm doing, and eventually group coaching. And there'll be webinars and there'll be all that stuff so that we can reach as many people as possible. And also to reach underprivileged families who may not have access to these things, so that we can get not to just one level of family, but to everybody. And so that is my ultimate goal, is to, whether it be from my program or from somebody else teaching the same type of parenting, that's all that matters to me, is to get
and that is
message out into the world, and not just the United States. It's global, these issues.
Absolutely. They are. Absolutely. Stacey, where can people contact you or reach out to you if they're interested to learn more, not only about your book, but some of the coaching that you do for parents, and or just maybe some parents want to reach out to you for some advice and helpful hints? Where would you like them to reach? Where's your information you'd like them to contact you through?
Well, I'm in the process of refining my website. So that'll be under my name, staceysilberman.com, when it comes out. I'm also on Instagram as Stop Screaming at Your Kids. And I'm on TikTok as Stacey Silberman. And I'm also on Facebook as Stacey Silberman. So I don't know if people will remember all of these things, but if you look on social media for my name, you will find me. And but hopefully the website will be completed within the next month, and that would be the ideal place to find where I offer my coaching and group classes in the future.
Fantastic. And what you and I will be staying in contact. So I'll be making sure as the information about the website gets released and so forth, we will make sure that we will have a link in the bio, and we will be putting that word out, as well as have you back on, because I think there's some other issues that we can be useful in giving some of our experience in working with young people, where we can share that again to have you back on the program. Does that sound good?
That sounds great. There's also on my Instagram, there's a link tree, which also has some interesting stuff about Max as well. So if you wanted to see more about Max, and Max is on Instagram, there's some old photos, Max Emilian Silberman. Fantastic. He's out there all over the internet.
He is, and he is also out there and inside of our hearts. His infectious laugh and some of the really quick quips that he would mention are still in my heart, and he's missed, but he is still present. And I'm so glad you're continuing to carry on his legacy and help other parents get inspired and get useful tips on parenting, because we want to continue to improve wherever we can. I remember my dad saying, if you can think about being a better parent, do it. Use all the ways that you can. It's never a criticism against your parenting skills, but it's always more that we can do. And it's not just in the perfectionism. It's just that we always want to continue to grow and evolve as far as our children are concerned. Stacey, thank you. As I call you Mama Stacey as well, thank you so much, Stacey Silberman, for being with us today. I can't tell you the joy it brought to my heart. I'm so encouraged and inspired that the YMCA Youth and Government Program of the kids who knew Maxie, now adults, and so especially the parents who are going to be inspired by what you've written and be able to get the resources of your book. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Seth. I really appreciate your time. You're doing great work here too.
Thank you so much, Stacey. I truly appreciate it. And now you and I are going to be dipping and dabbing in the TikTok space, and we're going to be helping support each other in the TikTok area.
You got it. You got it. I'm going to teach you everything that I learned in my little class.
It sounds so good to me. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and parents who are all out there in the Makers Bar audience, I want to tell you, one of the most important jobs that we have is being a parent. It's also one of the most incredible blessings that we have as parents. And as we mentioned, in doing so, we want to be the best at it that we can. Stacey's book is helping us to continue to improve on those insights. Stop screaming at your kids. It's sometimes fun that we can look back on some of the old school parents and the ways that they raised us. But there's also some insight to stop screaming at your kids and what that can do to them. So this book is helpful to those who are looking forward to its arrival and when it's coming out. Well, the Love-olution is the revolution that we want, a revolution of love. Let's continue to encourage a revolution and build that as the Love-olution. If you like our guests and the content that you're seeing here, please press like, share, and subscribe. We are looking so forward to being with you again here at Makers Bar. It's your guy, Seth Garu Baxter for Makers Bar, and our incredible guest today, Stacey Silberman, author of Stop Screaming at Your Kids, and more to come. Pardon me, and more to come in her private coaching, assisting parents to be the best that we can be. Stacey, we love you, and we thank you so much for being here with us today, and we're looking forward to the next time you're going to join us.
Thank you, and you have a wonderful evening. The book is supposed to be coming out in June 2025. Let's hope it does.
Oh, yes. Yes, we are. It is going to be there. We're speaking into an existence, and again, we will be having you on a second time to be able to discuss it further.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Love to you, Stacey, and love to all the Makers Bar audience. We're looking forward to seeing you next time here from Makers Bar, where we're creating 1 million leaders today for tomorrow. You are the leader you wanted. We'll talk to you next time, folks. Peace and good love.